How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? I am Dave B. I sell Chevrolets at Schumacher Chevrolet of Livingston in Livingston, New Jersey. And today we're going to talk about my salesmanship gauge that I created. Now, like you have a fuel gauge that tells you when your fuel tank is either empty or full, or a temperature gauge in your car that tells you when your engine is running hot or cold, this is the salesmanship gauge, which shows where the salesperson in the middle here sits between the dealership they work for and the customer that they're helping. And like a fuel gauge or a temperature gauge or a volt gauge, this gauge has a needle in the middle, and this needle can move depending on where it needs to be for a particular situation. Again, in today's video, we're going to talk about this gauge that I created and where I feel this needle should lie for the majority of your sales career as a salesperson. To get started here, let's take an average salesperson, and let's say that average salesperson focuses 100% on the dealership, meaning all of their thoughts, all of their motives, everything that they're doing is literally with just the dealership in mind. How do you think the customers are going to feel? How do you think the clientele that comes into that store is going to feel? Are they going to see that? Are they going to see through that salesperson that all they care about is the dealership, maybe the profits, making that sale at that moment, at that time? Someone who focuses 100% on the dealership is probably very high pressure, and in my opinion, probably a very transactional salesperson, meaning they're focusing on that transaction, that particular day, that minute, and when that customer is pushed either too hard and decides to leave or doesn't buy that car, they'll generally blame the customer and say, we would have never sold them anyway. Meanwhile, the customer could have just been turned off based on how that salesperson was handling them and their transaction. Now, the opposite of that would be a salesperson who focuses 100% on the customer. It does not think about the dealership at all. Sounds great. Sounds like the experience would be very good for the customer. However, if you're only fighting for the customer and everything the customer wants, you're not going to make the dealership happy. So are you really going to get the deals that you're fighting for? Are you going to be able to do everything that that customer wants, going to your managers and going to your owners in your dealership? Probably not. And in turn, you're probably not going to make your customers happy either, because you're not going to be able to achieve what they're looking for all the time. So where would the best place for this needle to lie land? Pretty much right here, 50-50 in the middle, right? The dealership's happy, 50%. The customer's happy, 50%. That's the ideal way I think most dealerships and salespeople and customers alike would probably like to operate. However, it's not reality. And in my experience, where I feel this needle should lie is a little bit towards the customer. Now, personally, I feel that way because without the customer, the dealership doesn't even exist. The dealership is here. We have a product. We have some stuff to sell, whether it be product or services, body shop, service department, vehicles. We're here to provide a service and a product. But if nobody buys that service or product, how long would this dealership last? Now, why I lean a little bit towards the customer side is because I want that customer to know that I am truly here to help them. I'm truly here to make sure that they have a nice, easy, low pressure experience at a fair price. And if I can do that once, maybe I can do it a second time, a third time. Maybe I can do it for a family member. Maybe I can do it for a friend, a coworker, and basically build a book of business of customers who are very confident and relaxed in dealing with me, in that they're happy to come to the dealership that I work for. And personally, I've proven that. I've dealt with customers so much that I've had customers that bought 8, 9, 10 cars. Remember, I started selling Chevys in 2004. I worked for a dealership for about 8 months. That dealership closed. That's when I came here to this location. Now, at that time, this was not a Schumacher Chevrolet store. This was a different ownership who had this store since the 50s. They ended up selling it to the Schumachers in 2017. So when I started here in 2005, we had different ownership. I worked here basically all but 2 years, where I lived out in Pennsylvania and worked for a different Chevy store out there. I came back to this store. Again, a couple years later, the dealership was bought out, and the Schumachers took over, and it's been great ever since. But of the 17 to 18 years that I've been selling cars, I spent literally 15 of it here at this same location, and I built a huge customer base over the years just by what I feel is knowing my product, being able to explain that product to customers, honestly dealing with my customers with their best interests at heart. Again, using this needle as an example that, I'm not going to pressure them into doing something they don't want to do. I'm going to provide them with all the information I can and let them make that decision. But by doing that, I actually help out the dealership more because I have repeat customers that keep coming back. We talked about it earlier. If this needle was pegged to the dealership side, you may sell cars. You may get that transaction, that one transaction. But will that customer come back to you in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? Or in some cases, I have customers that come back 7 years later who remember me, quite frankly, from my own errors in that I haven't been actively reaching out to, but they remember me and they come back to experience this. Now, I know what you're thinking. In recent times, things have been completely different, right? The dealerships are charging over MSRP. There's a lot of things going on, which are really, this needle is pegged to the dealership side. And even as a salesperson, a lot of this stuff is out of our control. We don't have the ability to do anything about that. You know, if a dealership's charging X over MSRP, obviously this needle's price-wise is going directly to the dealership. It's not helping the customer, but that's just the supply and demand times that we're currently in. Now, what we can do is we can still treat our customers with all the respect we can. We can give them a great experience. We can give them all the information they need, and we could not pressure them into doing something they don't want to do or trying to sugarcoat the situation. Like the way I look at it, when I'm selling a customer now, like let's say a Tahoe, and currently Tahoes are very hard to get. Suburbans are very hard to get. There's probably about an 8-month wait if you order one. If we happen to have one here, currently we're selling them at $2,500 over MSRP. The best thing I could do for a salesperson and for my customer is to explain that up front. Let me get that information out as soon as possible. This way they're not shocked with that 2 hours down the road when they're ready to buy a vehicle. And that's exactly what I do. I explain it outside when I'm looking at the vehicle. Now, if they're turned off by that and they don't want to pay that, I'm still willing to give them the time that they're there to go over vehicles, answer questions, let them test drive, do everything they want, even if they have no intention on buying the vehicle. Again, I'm leaning towards the customer and the customer experience that maybe one day they'll come back. I mean, I got to admit, this really is a pretty cool little gauge here. What are your thoughts? Like, what do you think about this this video so far? You know, your thoughts on this gauge, experiences maybe you had. I made this myself. I took this picture of the dealership out front. This is my best friend's parents when they bought their Equinox. This is a work of art. Another thing I'd like to touch on is the salesperson themselves, right? Whew, do we get a bad reputation, right? Now, obviously, there's reason for that. Now, the funny thing is, this has been going on for decades, right? So the way I see it, when I started in 2004, 2005, my thought process was, I'm going to change the industry. I'm going to change the business. I'm going to be the opposite of the normal salesperson stereotypes. And I've been living that way my entire career and working that way my entire career. Now, back in like the 70s and 80s, I hear the stories from some of the older salespeople I worked with that worked in that time frame. It was the Wild West. I mean, customers really got ripped off and really had a tremendous hard time buying a car. Now, as time progressed, governments got more involved and regulated a lot of things and tried to help the consumer with advertising, with rate caps, with things of this nature. Also, the internet came about. Once the internet came about, we were flooded with information. So now, in today's time, the automotive industry is probably the easiest one to negotiate because everything you need is online. There's a ton of YouTube gurus out there that will tell you everything you need to know about buying a car and how to help you get a great deal and how to essentially not have the dealership make any money. But the idea of that is that the dealership has to make something because if not, they won't go out of business. And if they go out of business, then there's no product or service for the customer to buy. And without the customer, like we talked about earlier, there's no dealership to offer a product or service. So as long as dealerships exist, which maybe their days are numbered, well, time will tell, this is the experience that you're gonna have to go with. Now, what I recommend you do is embrace the salesperson. You can tell if a salesperson has your best interests at heart or if they're just doing whatever they got to do to sell a car. If you're dealing with someone that is only doing what they have to do to sell a car and they don't know their product and they're not giving you the experience you want, give them a little bit of time, explain that you're still thinking, you're shopping multiple models, and exit the dealership. Find another dealership. Go online, look at reviews. Find someone like myself. There's got to be more people like me out there that are going to give you the time that you deserve and the experience that you really want. So embrace the salesperson. Now, the other reason why I say to embrace the salesperson is because we're looked at as the bad guy, right? We're the middleman between the dealership and you looking to buy a car. However, we're friendly, like we're a family. We're a dealership that we work together for years. I go to the gym with Sal, our manager. I mean, we hang out together. We go to each other's weddings. We literally spend time with each other. We're families. So when I have a customer at my desk who's trying to hit a payment or a budget, you know, I go to the manager. I can play that against the manager. I can go to the manager just like a salesman is, in a sense, working the deal with the customer. We work the deals with the manager. And my job as a salesperson is to sell my manager why maybe instead of here, maybe we need to be here. maybe we need to be, you know, more towards the customer on this particular deal. And the reason I say to embrace the salesperson, because a lot of times people will come in, they just want to deal with the manager, right? They just want to deal with the manager right to the point. And that's what YouTube people will teach you. Deal directly with the manager. Well, the manager's job is to protect the profits of the dealership. Their job is to make the money. It's the salesman's job to find the deal. So if I can sell them on why I need to do something particular for this particular customer, maybe they bought a number of cars from me, maybe they're having a rough time, let me be the person that talks to this manager who I literally live with at a dealership 50 hours a week, versus you going in and trying to talk to a manager where they don't even know your name. Like, they don't even know who you are. Like, until they get to know your name, if they do, you're basically just a person looking to buy a car and they're looking at numbers on a computer screen. That's basically it. What I can do as a salesperson is I can bring a human element to that buying process. And I can, you know, hopefully pull on their heartstrings a little bit and get you the deal you want. I do really like this gauge. I think I came up with a pretty cool little idea here. If you're a salesperson out there, and one, you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Two, drop in the comments what your thoughts are on this. What do you see in your experiences? Like, how long have you been in the business? What are your thoughts here? You know, do you tend to lean right to the dealership, or do you tend to lean more towards the customer? I'd love to read the responses and see what people think. Also, if you were out there and you're buying cars, you know, what have you experienced? Do you think this thought process or this video would help in any way? Hopefully it does. That's the ultimate goal here with me, Dave B, Sells Chevy.